Welcome everybody to the FAME Food as Medicine Every Day, and we are thrilled to have Lucas Schubert here with us tonight. You're free to go, Lucas.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks. Again, my name is Lucas Schubert. I am the Nutritional Health Coordinator at the St. Luke's Miralai Kaufman Women's Heart Center, as well as our Food as Medicine Everyday educator. And so a little bit about myself is I teach a program at St. Luke's here on the plaza. It's called Food as Medicine Every Day. It's a 12-week nutrition, community-based nutrition education program. And a component of that we teach is also a class focused on cancer and focused on what we call the cornerstones of FAME for cancer. And so a lot of what we're going to get and talk about today is going to be those concepts that we talk about in our cornerstones class. But we also offer a lot of other stuff. So if you want to find out more, you can certainly learn more about us online. And I have some information at the end that we'll share. I'll get through my PowerPoint and kind of the information and the concepts. And then at the end, we'll have the time for some questions. So feel free to write stuff down as if there's something I'm talking about that you want maybe explained a little bit more, or you have certain questions on that sort of thing. So let's go ahead and get started. So again, this is using food as medicine for cancer, or just generally, using food as a way to support your body to minimize the risk of developing cancer, of supporting cancer treatments, and then survivorship of cancer as well. So really the broad spectrum of cancer and how you can use food as a way to support your body. And that's really what we're looking at, is how you can use nutrition to really make yourself the healthiest you can be. So what are we going to get into today? Really, again, there's four cornerstones or four concepts that we get into, but we're going to talk about inflammation, and then also understanding inflammation and then anti-inflammatory properties that food contains, so antioxidants and those general concepts. Then we're going to get into digestion and understanding how food really plays a role in your digestion and how digestion plays a role in cancer support. And then we'll get into sweeteners and sugars, which I think is a really heavy topic to discuss, and just understanding the connection between cancer and sugar. And then lastly, understanding environmental exposures and toxins and organic foods, and if it's necessary or not with organics and what all that means. So we'll get into all of that throughout the topic or the discussion today. So to start off with most of my presentations that I do, I like to first present with the food as medicine everyday principles. And so in any discussion, no matter if it's about cancer or if it's about another condition or just general overall wellness, there are 6 guiding principles that we use in our food as medicine everyday program to really guide the education that we provide, and really just instilling these different principles in everyone to really make the best choices, the healthiest choices, and to develop the best body you can through food. So the first one is going to be promoting a more whole foods and low processed or less processed foods way of eating. There's general consensus among all diets or all ways of eating is that we need to be eating more whole foods, and we need to be reducing the amount of processed foods that we eat. Very simple, I know difficult to do, but a really important one to be incorporating into your life. So just choosing the more whole foods based food option in front of you is going to be really what is going to make a big difference. The second one is encouraging a more plant-based diet. This doesn't mean you can't eat animal products, but it's just knowing that we need to really rebalance our diets to be including more plants, and understanding that there are very specific nutrients that plants contain that are really beneficial for our health. And we'll get into those later. But just, antioxidants and fiber, those sorts of things are only found really from our plant foods. And so we really need to just rebalance our diets to be more plant-based. But if we choose to eat animal products, you're looking at number 3, is to include, foods from healthy animals. So really understanding how was the animal raised, what was the animal eating, We have a saying that you are what you eat eats, or meaning that the quality of the food that the animal eats is going to directly translate into the quality of nutrients you receive from that animal product. So you are what you eat eats. Number 4 is promoting a more anti-inflammatory food choices. So really, if you're doing 1, 2, and 3, you're already doing number 4. You're promoting anti-inflammatory food choices, but just knowing that inflammation is really the underlying cause of most of our conditions and diseases and poor health. And we'll get into that in much more detail later. And then number 5, which I think is my favorite that has been included on here, is just that we're all individuals and we all have our own unique food needs. And to say that one specific way of eating or one specific diet or one specific food is going to be the cure for everyone or the most beneficial thing for everyone, it's not realistic. So we need to recognize that we're all individuals. We all have our own unique, lifestyles, our own preferences, taste preferences for foods. We even have our own biological responses to food. So maybe an allergy or an intolerance. So you have to really play those into your own diet and build something that's going to be sustainable, that's going to be enjoyable, and something that's going to be beneficial for your needs. And then lastly, caring about food and food production. So just caring about the whole process of eating and choosing foods and where your food is coming from. We spend a lot of time and money on really healthy, nutritious foods, but do we actually enjoy the taste of the food or the process of cooking the food or the people that we get to enjoy that food with, or where is the food coming from? So again, these are what are our 6 guiding principles. And just if there's one thing you can take away from this is by keeping these in the back of your mind, these guiding principles, when you're making your food choices and making sure that your food choice is following these 6 things, that will really make a tremendous impact on your health just by doing that, with really not having to do much else. So the rest of the discussion is going to be cancer specific, but really this is our foundation of everything that we're talking about going forward. So again, like I mentioned, we have our own class at St. Luke's, and it's called our Cornerstones of Fame for Cancer series. And one class a week, we go through each of these 4 topics. And they are, really what we found to be the pinnacle of food and nutrition, and how you can, the different aspects or the different topics that are important to support your cancer journey, wherever that may be. And so these are the 4 things we're going to get through. So putting out the fire, inflammation, our gut health, sugar, and then what we call clean eating, or just understanding environmental toxins and food exposure, that sort of thing. So let's start out with our putting out the fire. So this is a report that was called the State of the U.S. Health from 1990 to 2016. And this found that the dietary risk factors are the leading cause of morbidity and mortality in the United States. What that means is our diet has a direct cause into the development of disease and the risk of dying from that disease. And there were 15 components of these risk factors, or these dietary risk factors. And you can see these on the screen, but it was diets that were low in fruits, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, nuts, seeds, fiber, omega-3s, polyunsaturated fats, calcium, and milk. So our diets are low in these sorts of foods. And then diets that were high in red meat, processed meat, sugar-sweetened beverages, trans fats, and sodium. And so if you really really look at this, it really somewhat makes sense that this is unfortunately what our standard American diet is really comprises most of. If there are diets that are high in these ultra processed foods, or these processed foods that contain these types of things, and so really wanting again rebalance our diets to reduce our risk, or to really help our body as much as possible. So if we're looking at inflammation, inflammation, like I mentioned, is the really the underlying cause of all of our diseases. Is some sort of inflammation is out of hand, and it's causing all of these issues. So things like cholesterol, high blood pressure, obesity, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and cancers, and so much more. But these were the ones that I really wanted to bring to attention, are caused by inflammation. And what is inflammation caused by? Well, one of those things is our diets. and those specifically are diets that are high in those things that we just discussed. And so really paying attention to our diet can play a role in either the development or the reduction of inflammation. And so that's what our goal is when it comes to our diet, is making food choices that reduce or control our inflammation as much as possible. And that's really going to help our bodies to really be the healthiest it can be. So really controlling that inflammation or even reducing it. But when it comes to inflammation, it's important to know that inflammation is a natural process of our bodies. We need inflammation in order to be healthy, but there are two different parts or two different categories of inflammation. Really, so the first one is what we refer to as the acute inflammation. And this is the kind of inflammation, say you get a cut on your arm, it gets red, it gets inflamed, it gets painful, but over time, a couple days, weeks, it'll start to heal itself, and then that'll go away. And that inflammation then is short-term or acute. So that's the kind of inflammation that we need. However, there is another form of inflammation known as chronic inflammation. And this is the inflammation that is systemic, meaning it's all over our bodies. It's chronic, so it's long-term. And a lot of times it's more internal. So you don't actually see your body being inflamed like you do that cut, but it's still there and it's still causing damage within our bodies. So the chronic inflammation is really the type of inflammation that we're wanting to focus on when it comes to our food and reducing our inflammation. Now, it's important to know too, if we refer back to this other slide where I said, the diets that were high in red meat and processed meat, that leads to inflammation. It's not that one day do you eat a piece of processed meat and do you create inflammation and then now you have diabetes. It's really this diets that are consistently high in these types of foods that then can lead to that chronic inflammation. So again, it's 5-10 years of diets that are even longer that will develop and lead to that chronic inflammation. But we can change that and we can reduce it, even though that happened over a long period of time. It doesn't take quite as long to help reduce that, and we can use our food to do that. So as it relates to cancer specifically and what inflammation and what all of this really means is this diagram here. So when it comes to cancer is developed or caused by really a damage to our cells' DNA. So it's just our cells have been damaged and they replicate and they create these cancerous cells. Well, so why is that? Why are our cells becoming damaged? Well, there's lots of different things. You can see that on the left side here. It's the sun rays, it's pollution, it's stress, but then it's also our diet. And our diet and these other things, they introduce what we refer to as free radicals into our bodies. And these free radicals are toxic, if you will, harmful particles that can go all around our body and create damage to our cells. They create what is called oxidation. So this oxidation is what damages our cells. However, we can introduce foods that have antioxidants, that's where that term comes from, and to stop that process from happening. So that's why antioxidants have their name and why they're important, because they really stop that damaging oxidation process from happening. So we'll get into that in a couple slides, but just knowing how that whole process and that link and that chain is from our diet and other factors into the development of cancer. So what are our inflammatory foods? What are the foods that we should really consider reducing or limiting? And it's going to be more of our processed foods. There's really no surprise there, but I want to bring this list so you at least have an understanding. First, it's going to be our refined carbohydrates. So these are going to be carbohydrates like white breads, pastas, bagels, cookies, crackers, those sorts of things, all the more processed things with lacking fiber. There's going to be added sugars and artificial sweeteners, and these include both your foods and your beverages are going to be more inflammatory. Highly processed vegetable oils, and where do you typically find highly processed vegetable oils? Well, it's going to be in your processed foods, in your snacks, in your cookies, your crackers, those sorts of foods. Sodium and salt, and then red meat and processed meat. Interestingly enough, so I was looking at the American Institute of Cancer Research, And they actually recommend, as far as red meat goes, to just limit red meat consumption to 18 ounces per week, which is, if you really think about that, that is a lot of red meat in a week. So it's not really, that much of a limitation. And that's more of your fresh cuts of red meat, but really trying to limit the processed meat, which is that picture at the bottom. And those are going to be more of the inflammatory foods. And then all of your hot dogs and bologna, so just don't really contain much nutritional value to them, so trying to limit those. But then we have our more anti-inflammatory foods. So as I mentioned about antioxidants, and you saw this picture there, these are going to be our, what we refer to as eat the rainbow. And you may or may not have heard this term before, but there's really a reason that that recommendation is made. So to eat a variety of colors, a variety of foods, and the reason for that is that there are various antioxidants in all of those different colors. So as you see here in that diagram, there are antioxidants that create the specific color in our food. And each of those antioxidants are going to help us in a different way, in a different process. So for example, beta carotene, as far as it relates to cancer, beta carotene is really great at reducing our cancer cell growth. So it's going to keep those cancer cells from expanding or going out of control. And then we have sulforaphane, which is typically found in our leafy greens, where this is actually a great antioxidant to reduce carcinogens and remove toxins from our body. And so both of these are going to have an impact on our risk or the progression of cancer, but they're going to do it in different ways. And so trying to get this wide variety, different colors, and different types of foods, that's why that's so important, to just get those other antioxidants or those other nutrients that are going to do lots of different things for us. So try to eat the rainbow, try to eat a variety of food, and really, also all of these are going to have different flavors. So you're going to add some, spice or some taste to your diet and to your meals. So what are going to be our antioxidant-rich foods? Not really any surprise here. It's going to be more of our vegetables, fruits, grains, nuts, seeds, so our whole foods. But also wanted to point out here that it is our herbs and spices too. And these are going to be our antioxidant-rich foods. So it's not just our fruits and vegetables, which is, I think, what is often seen as the things that we should be including more, and we should. But our whole grains and nuts and seeds, those two can be really helpful. So next, so I left this slide in. So I did this presentation with the Advanced Breast Cancer group at St. Luke's, and it's a very common topic as far as it relates to cancer or breast cancer. And so I wanted to at least leave this in here just so you have an indication of this, that there's this big debate about, is soy dangerous as far as it relates to cancer and breast cancer. And again, looking at the American Institute of Cancer Research, which is this very large governmental body, I believe, actually, I don't think it's governmental. I think it's just it's an institute that really is looking at the cancer research. And what their stance is that soy really doesn't have an increased risk for any breast cancer. And so that soy can be part of a good diet or part of a nutritious diet. So there's really no concern for soy. And this is a direct quote from their website. It's just that consistent findings from studies indicate no increased risk for breast cancer survivorship. And just knowing that there's lots of different factors that play into soy consumption and how it impacts our risk for cancer. So again, we can talk about that later if anyone has any specific questions, but I'll move on. But just at least wanted to say here that soy, not really that much of a concern when it comes to cancer. All right, moving on from inflammation into our defending the gut class. And this is looking at the gut and looking at digestion. So when it comes to digestion, you really have to understand what digestion means. And it's just essentially the breakdown of food, which allows for the absorption of nutrients. So we need to have good, adequate digestion in order to actually be absorbing those nutrients that we are consuming in our food. Because, there is, you may have heard of the term, you are what you eat. And that's true. But if you see this quote here, there's actually a lot more to it. that you are what you eat, digest, absorb, and eliminate, that there is this long process of our body actually turning that apple into nutrients that we can actually use and benefit from. So we have to be optimizing our digestion and our digestive system as much as possible to make sure that we're getting really efficient digestion and really efficient absorption of those nutrients. Because you could eat the healthiest meal, but if you don't have good digestion, that's just going to essentially go through you and you're going to eliminate it without ever having actually absorbed any of those great nutrients that you ate. So how do you support your gut? How do you get good digestion? Really these things here are going to be something to pay attention to. First of all, I think, gut health is important in cancer because a lot of our treatments are going to be damaging the gut specifically because our gut it's just really one cell thick. And so it's very easy to be damaged, which is going to lead to inflammation and poor nutrient absorption, which just spirals into further issues. And so trying to help our gut as much as possible. So I've listed a few things here that you can do to help with your gut. So first, mindful eating. This is, really just a good tool to use for anyone and everyone. And what that means is just that you're paying attention to your eating. You're not necessarily distracted by something else. You're also eating slowly. So by eating slowly, you're allowing your digestive system time to actually break down and work and absorb that food that you're eating rather than just scarfing it in your mouth all at once or eating within 5 minutes of a whole entire meal. You're really going to support your digestive system more by spanning that out over 15, 20 minutes or maybe even longer. So really just being more mindful of how you're eating and, chewing more, really just paying attention. Again, that goes back to our principles that we were talking about, the last one, caring about food and food production. So just caring about, by being mindful eating, you can really taste the food, you can enjoy the flavors, you can enjoy the textures, all that delicious food. So that can all be really important and helpful for your gut. The next one is going to be fiber. Fiber is incredibly important for our digestive system and our gut health and all of the great things that happen within our digestive system. Fiber can support that. And so the way we get fiber, again, is going to be from our more whole foods. Our heavily processed foods, a lot of times, have fiber removed from them. And so by including foods that contain more fiber, we're supporting our gut in that way. And so you see here, these are recommendations. These are per day recommendations. So 25 grams for women or 38 grams for men are going to be what the daily recommendation of fiber is going to be, which these are actually pretty tough for a lot of individuals to consume nowadays. So if you find yourself eating a more processed food diet and you're wanting to transition to more fiber, I would recommend just going slowly at this. Otherwise, you may create some gut issues and discomfort from consuming too much fiber all at once. But again, fiber can be really great sources or really great source of support for your gut. Next is going to be pro and prebiotics, which I'll lump into our fermented foods because our fermented foods are really going to be the types of foods that contain our probiotics. But these are in your gut are all of these bacteria, and they're beneficial, so they're probiotics. And they actually they support a lot of the gut processes and the digestion processes. They create hormones, they create different vitamins for our body to use. So really developing and creating a good, healthy gut environment is a way to really develop those probiotics within your gut. And then prebiotics are going to be essentially food for your bacteria. And a lot of our high fiber foods are going to be our prebiotics. So really any of our whole foods are going to be some sort of probiotic or prebiotic for our bacteria. And then fermented foods are going to be foods that actually contain some bacteria in them, and then limiting inflammatory foods. So our processed foods already kind of went through this, but those are going to be ones that are really going to damage your gut and really create that poor absorption and just that poor gut health. So again, fermented foods. Here I have a list here that you can see, and you can, maybe try some of these sometimes. But this is a recommendation that I would really, try out and see if there's something that you like, because just adding a spoonful of sauerkraut, it's really all you need per day to get some good beneficial probiotics. So fermented foods, sauerkraut, yogurt, kimchi, tempeh. Kimchi is going to be another fermented cabbage. Tempeh is fermented soy. Kefir is a fermented milk product. And then kombucha is going to be a fermented tea. I will say that kombucha is becoming pretty popular nowadays, but you do need to pay attention to what is actually in your kombucha, because a lot of times they're adding a lot of sugar to the kombucha just to make it taste better, because it is somewhat sour and vinegary. It's not necessarily a great flavor, rather until you add that sugar, and that's what a lot of those products have in them. And then you can see this little note here is that our prebiotics, or our probiotics, excuse me, are living organisms. They're bacteria that we want to help our gut. And so these are going to need to be restored, or need to be stored in the refrigerator. And that's where you should find them in the grocery store. So sauerkraut from a can is not necessarily going to contain that beneficial probiotics that you need. So finding sauerkraut or pickles or fermented veggies from the refrigerated section is really where you're going to find those types of foods. So these are going to be fermented foods, a great help for your gut health. All right, moving on from gut health, then we're going to get into sugar and understanding sugar and artificial sweeteners, and really how that plays a role in our health and cancer as well. So a very common thing that I hear all the time is that sugar feeds cancer. And while this is cancer cells do use sugar for energy, all of our body cells use sugar for energy. So they're no different as it relates to that for our energy needs. But as it relates to creating cancer or the development of cancer, there's really more of an indirect link between sugar and cancer. And so if you see here at the bottom, the reason that or diets that are high in sugar, maybe I would say it that way, it's not necessarily the sugar specifically. Again, it's diets that are consistently high in sugars that can lead to obesity and weight gain, or even insulin resistance. And these two conditions can lead to high inflammation and poor immune function. And as it relates to cancer, these are really the two things that we want to control the most, is our inflammation and supporting our immune system. So when it relates to our diet, I should have mentioned this really at the beginning, and I forgot to, but as it relates to our diet, what we're really looking for is, again, controlling and reducing inflammation and supporting our immune system. And the types of foods that we eat plays a direct role in doing those two things. So that's really the link between sugar and cancer. It's not necessarily, if you have a candy bar, are you causing your cancer cells to grow? It's not really that direct. There is a more indirect pathway. And again, it's diets that are consistently high in these types of foods that are going to be the issue. So when we talk about sugar, though, and diets that are high in sugar, and knowing that there are different types of sugars in our food, that if we go back to the more inflammatory foods, it specifically calls out added sugars and artificial sweeteners and not naturally occurring sugars. So we have to distinguish between these two to understand what are really the beneficial and nutritional sugars, if you will, and the more harmful or non-nutritional sugars. So the first one is a naturally occurring sugar. It's just as the name suggests, it occurs naturally in our food. So this is going to be things in your fruits, in your veggies, in your grains, even your dairy. All of these things have naturally occurring sugars. And there's really no concern in watching the amount of naturally occurring sugars. Generally, there are specific reasons, for instance, with diabetes, that you may have to actually count the amount. But generally, for most of us, you're not going to really need to pay attention. Eat as many fruits and veggies as you want, and you don't really have to worry too much about the sugar in there, because that sugar is really wrapped up in a lot of other nutrients. You have the fiber, you have the antioxidants, you have the fats and proteins in there that are reducing the impact that sugar has on your body. However, the next one, our added sugars, are the sugars that we need to be more concerned about and trying to limit as much as possible. And these are going to be sugars that are essentially added to our foods and beverages. No real surprise there. But again, our drinks or sugary sweetened drinks, candies, cookies, all of those sorts of things. You can see that there. But again, paying attention to the amount of added sugars is going to be what we want to be doing, and you can do that through looking at really your food label or your ingredients list and finding out if there are actually added sugars in there. And again, the name, it's an added sugar. So if you see some type of sugar in the ingredients list, it has an added sugar. So what is the recommendation? So this is from the American Heart Association, and their recommendation is going to be no more than 9 teaspoons or 36 grams for men and 6 teaspoons or 24 grams for women. So usually just do the 36 grams for men, 24 grams for women. It also includes teens and kids. And again, this is a maximum amount. This isn't an amount that you should try to be obtaining every single day. You want to really, 0 is really the optimal amount. But of course, you're going to be eating some sort of sugars, and that's fine. But just trying to limit it really below this recommendation here. But you can see the average American daily added sugar intake is much higher than our recommendation. We're at about 80 grams. And if I were to take so this is all Americans, if I were to take the adults out of the equation and just look at kids and teens, we're up to about 110 or 120 grams on average. And so knowing that it's more of a concern really for our kids and our teens, and that comes with all of the processed foods and the sugary drinks and those sorts of things that are highly palatable, good taste, that are found in a lot of our diets. So trying to, again, limit the amount of added sugars as much as possible. So what are some examples of added sugars that you may see in your foods? Well, there's really 2 different categories. I like to call these, the first one are plant and animal-based sugars. These are going to be things like your white sugar, your brown sugar, but even your honey, your maple syrup, that coconut sugar, the agave, those sorts of things are still going to be added sugars. They're still going to have the same impact on your blood sugar, same impact on your gut and your inflammation as just white sugar. These are always touted as the healthier option, but you need to be still watching the amount of these that you're consuming. And then fruit juice specifically is one that, even though it's from a fruit, whenever we just extract the fruit juice, it's, as far as our bodies are concerned and the impact that the sugar has on our blood sugar, it's no different than these other types of sweeteners. So that fruit juice that you're having, needs to be counted into that 24 or 36 grams of added sugar. So really paying attention to how much fruit juice that you're consuming if you're wanting to reduce or limit your added sugars. And then over here on the other side are artificial sugars, and these are going to be ones that are really more made up in a lab. Really, again, these are going to be sugars found in highly processed food. So that would be really the reason to stay away from them. It's just that there's really no nutritional value to these. But just want to at least bring you some names of what those would be. All right, so moving on from our added sugars, we'll get into what we refer to as our clean eating, or just talking about environmental toxins and exposures. And just as I don't think most of us likely know this, but knowing that cancer is caused by the alteration of how our cells function, and that can be impacted through lots of different things from the environment. So you have your toxic chemicals, such as in tobacco smoke, or you have radiation, such as from your the sun rays. And some of these you can control, and others you can't. But you at least need to try to or eliminate as many of those that you can control, and reduce the potential for, again, the development, the progression, or the impact that those can have on cancer. So as it relates to food, though, really knowing when it comes to the food, so this is what we're going to be looking at, because this is more of a nutrition topic. really the concern of the environmental toxins are going to be those hormones, the pesticides and herbicides, antibiotics, the food additives. This list is really going to be the things that have the potential to create some sort of damage or some sort of issue within our bodies. And so trying to limit or avoid these as much as possible is ideal. So when one important thing, or one common thing that is brought up, is trying to include more organics, and thinking, and for good reason, that organic foods is what you should be eating in order to help with your cancer, or that's the only type of food you should eat. And it's not so clear cut. And I think this quote, which is from the Environmental Working Group, which I'll mention in our next slide, I love this quote because it brings home the importance of first eating diets rich in fruits and vegetables before eating organic. So this says, although we believe consumers should be concerned about pesticides on foods that they eat, the health benefits of a diet rich in fruits and vegetables outweigh the risks of pesticide exposure. So what this means is I would much rather have someone eat a conventionally raised apple that may contain some pesticides than a bag of chips or a highly processed cookie. That apple, even though it may contain some fruits or it may contain some pesticides, is going to contain a lot more as far as our nutritional value than that bag of chips or that cookie or cracker. So starting first by changing your diet to more fruits and vegetables, and then if you have the ability to maybe change some of those fruits and vegetables to more organic, in order to help your diet and to really add on to that, the elimination or supporting, again, that inflammation and supporting your immune system. Because every time that we introduce some sort of environmental toxin, our immune system is having to fight or remove that that environmental toxin that was introduced. So that doesn't, you're not allowing your immune system the ability to also work on eliminating the cancer. So it's having to go both places. So if that toxin's not even there in the first place, then that our immune system can be doing other things more helpful for us. So if you are looking to choose organic, there is this great list. It's called from the Environmental Working Group, or the EWG, that's called the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. And you can just search for this online. They have the list there for you, and they update it every year. And these are what they refer to as the Dirty Dozen, which is the top 12 produce items that contain the highest amount of pesticides and herbicides when they tested. And then you have the Clean 15, which was the top 15 fruits and vegetables that contain the least amount of chemicals whenever they were tested. And so if you're wanting to choose or switch out, really starting on the foods that are on the Dirty Dozen here. And if you look at these, the reason that these are on here is that these are the more fragile, if you will, or the fruits or vegetables that are exposed to the environment. And so it makes sense that they would have to use more pesticides and herbicides on these in order to make sure that they stay the freshest that they can. They look that great, color at the grocery store. And so, again, paying attention to this list would be a way to maybe save yourself some grocery dollars by knowing that, oh, I don't have to get that, organic avocado. I can save $1 per avocado by getting just the conventional avocado and be fine with that and be comfortable with my decision. Where maybe I'll then buy some organic strawberries and maybe buy them when they're in season and on sale, rather than out of season and much more expensive. So again, this is a great list to pay attention to and something to look up. And again, this changes every year. All right, so we've hit on all 4 of our cornerstones. Want to make sure that you have time for questions, but I will end with this, just things that we really should be considering and really paying attention to. And when it comes to food and nutrition, really thinking more about your individual diet, making sure that it's sustainable, something that you enjoy, and knowing that you eat food and not nutrients. So as many times as you hear on the media or online that this certain nutrient is the cure-all for cancer, this certain food is going to be what is the harmful, the worst type of food for you. you really have to look at the broad spectrum or the broad picture and know that you're eating all of these foods and nutrients in a full meal. And so, I think it's important to look at it that way rather than just picking every single nutrient and knowing that, oh, I need more of this or I have to have less of that. I'm just trying to have a more balanced whole foods diet. And then eating food you recognize in nature, I think, is an easy thing to do whenever you're out shopping or maybe you're purchasing or you're at a restaurant, trying to make the choice of things that you would actually recognize growing in nature. So I have a saying that there are apple trees, but there are no Cheeto trees. So you're going to, really be looking for the things that you could find in nature. And that's what's going to be beneficial and nutritious for you. And then I've already hit on that we're all individuals, but I highly think this is incredibly important for all of us to pay attention to. And no matter what you hear on the media or even from friends and family, trying to build a way of eating that works for you, but again, that incorporates more of a whole foods, less processed foods way of eating. That's what's going to be beneficial for you and really helpful for your health. So I'll leave you with this. I love Michael Pollan's quote, "Eat food, not too much, and mostly plants." So here is the information for our FAME course or classes, so you can check us out online, give us a call, or look at us on social media. So with that, Anita, I think I am all done. How would you like to continue?